Hello, everyone. Welcome to day 4 of AP Week. Today, we're going to go over our AP History classes at Branham, namely World History, AP US History, and then Gov/Econ. So this is our, 4th day. And we're going to start off with speaker introductions. We're going to go over the exam and overviews for each class. And then we're going to have a Q&A for anyone who is interested. So our speakers for today are me, Emma, if she can make it, Tommy, and then we have another speaker for APUSH, which is Jake. So we're going to start off with world history. And then basically what you're going to see over the year is these different chunks. So starting off with the global tapestry, which is just the time period from 1200, and then that's going to go into state building, and then other topics include imperialism, industrialization, wars, so like the global wars, and then globalization. I'm going to go into more about those time chunks later. And then the test itself consists of an MCQ, which is a multiple choice questions for those who are just getting into the whole AP process. And then DBQ, which stands for document-based question, LEQ, which stands for a long essay question, SAQ, which is short answer question. And then these each have their own time limit. So it's 55 questions in 55 minutes. DBQ is 1 hour. LEQ is 40 minutes. And then SAQ is typically 20 minutes per. It's changed since this AP year was a bit different than before because there were digital tests. And then the year before that, I remember it being even shorter. And then let's go over time periods for MCQs. So this is the College Board's basically unit by unit time period, and then the weight it has on the exam. So it starts from 1200 to 1450, goes on to 1450 to 1750, 1750 to 1900, and then 1900 to the present. And if you notice, 1450 to 1900 has the biggest weight on the exam, meaning it will you'll probably see either more of it or they'll just be they'll be like graded harsher, graded with more points. And then we also have this next portion is the types of DBQs you'll see on the exam. So there are 3 types you'll see typically is comparison essays, causation essays, or CCOT, which stands for change in continuity over time. Comparison, as you can kind of imagine, is like comparing either two empires, and then causation, for example, would be like what caused this event or how did it what caused this event. And then change in continuity is basically the same empire or the same location, how has it changed over time because of this event or just because of global interactions. And then for next, the LEQ is you get a prompt and you have to look at the certain time period where it's from, and basically from your own knowledge or what you already know, you have to answer the question while also using what we call in WHAP, or what Miss McKinnis taught us in WHAP, which is T-SPICE, which is T stands for technological, S stands for social, P stands for, let me explain. So T, technological, could be like a, maybe it's transportation, maybe it's communication advancements. Social, S, is like, let's say, hierarchical, social hierarchy. And then P, political, maybe it's like government intervention, stuff like that. I, interactions with the environment would be maybe it's deforestation, maybe it's like types of farming. C, cultural is more of like religion. And then E is economic, which is basically how is the market reacting? How is this affecting the whether the economy is like in a crash or it's booming, stuff like that. And then for SAQ is the types of questions you're going to see are identifying questions and explaining questions. And I'm pretty sure there's one more, but identify and explain are the most common. And basically it will give you either these SAQs will either be based off of a stimulus or there will not be a stimulus. Stimulus means like a document, or maybe it's a photo. And basically, if there's a stimulus, you look at it and then you find it and you make a connection based on what time period this is coming from, and you explain why it's relevant or how it answers the question. And then explain is kind of self-explanatory. You just make a claim and then you explain how it's relevant, kind of like the identify one. But this one, you have to make a deeper connection. So you do have to have some previous knowledge to answer most of these explain SAQs. What tips do you have for taking notes? Let me go back to present. So since WHAP is a lot of people's first AP, it can and it's pretty heavy on note taking. It's sometimes hard to like effectively take notes, like taking notes, like retaining the information. So a lot of the time, people either there are people either like to annotate a lot. So like write your notes, maybe go over with a highlighter, maybe write some extra notes on your notes, maybe like make some flashcards to help you remember the information. There's also stuff like the chapter outlines that Miss McInnes will show you guys, which is basically the textbook summary of what you're gonna study over the chapters. And personally, I found that a lot more effective since it's basically taking out the most like what you need to know. It's taking out the most detailed not detailed, the most important information, and then all you really need to do is make sure you highlight it over again, make sure it's deep in your head, make sure it's you like you make the connections between the notes and the textbook. And what are some good websites, other sources to study from? I personally used Heimler a lot, Heimler's history. He has a entire playlist on all the units of WHAP. I'm pretty sure he just finished it like not too long ago, a couple months ago. And then I also, for my exams, since I took it this year, I used, what's his name? I have it here. I use Freemanpedia's Around the World in 80 Days. I don't have the link. I will probably put it down in the description, but he has a review for basically the entire year worth of WHAP, and he condenses it into these 2-minute, 3-minute videos, and then he does it over the course of 80 days. So I found that really helpful. And the one thing I would take into consideration, however, with these reviews, especially with Heimler and Freemanpedia, is that though they basically remind you the things you might have forgotten but from reading the textbook, you shouldn't rely only on them, because you need some source of outside evidence. So maybe it's a your own personal knowledge from a history book, or it's something you got from like physically reading the actual textbook or something like that, especially because a lot of the a big portion of the test isn't actually going to be information that you might have gotten from these reviews, but more um, whether you understand it well enough to realize that that was the same trend during that time. But yeah, that's basically it for WAP.
Okay, so now for the overview of the APUSH exam. The APUSH exam covers these major events, which include colonization, the American Revolution, the American Civil War, industrialization, the World Wars, and the Cold War. This exam has 55 multiple choice questions, 3 short answer questions, and 1 document-based question. At least that's what it was for the digital version this year. But in past years, I think they've included an LEQ on there as well, so that's something to look out for. And the best way to remember everything for me, I thought that what like testing myself on the material was like super important to in order to retain the information. My method for studying, or my method for remembering everything that I thought was really helpful was I would take notes into Quizlet, like read one complete thought from the textbook and put the summary of that thought in my own words into Quizlet, and then write a question for it that would help me like answer the question, and then I would know exactly what the answer was because I had typed it in, and that would make me feel really confident knowing that like, okay, now I know all the material. And so then once I had created the Quizlet and then periodically reviewed the material over the course of the unit, then I would like divide the material into 4 to 6 different concepts. So then I knew that I had like concepts ready to go for a thesis statement on exam day, and or on like testing day when the unit final was. And then once I had the concepts, then I would write down like 4 to 6 of like the most important like supporting pieces of supporting evidence for that concept. So then I could like, now I know walking into the unit final, I know all the material, and in addition to that, I know what concepts I can use, and I know supporting pieces of evidence for those concepts. So I know that I have everything that I need going into the unit final, and that made me feel really confident. And so that was how I did it. I know that that's not a universal strategy, and that everyone will come up with their own strategies. But overall, I think that it's just really important to test yourself in some way with questions, because I don't think that just reading over your notes is a very efficient way to memorize the material. I think it's better if you're like actively recalling the information. I know other people like to make diagrams or flowcharts or what have you, so it kind of depends, but that was just what worked best for me. And then, yeah, so I kind of already touched on the taking notes and reading from the textbook. Some like other helpful things that I picked up on were when it has like the head, like the main heading for there's like a couple, like 3 or 4 I think throughout each chapter in the textbook, and then it's divided into like the subheadings. And so it's kind of important to like be able to track in your head, I would say, what exactly is going on for each heading, because like the textbook isn't going to follow a like completely fluid flow of the material, right? It's going to be divided into chunks here and there, and so that's kind of important to remember. And then for the note taking, I would say like the teachers are definitely there to help you, and so if you ever needed to ask a question on something that was in the note or in the textbook that you didn't understand, then I would totally recommend going to them and asking, because if you get like bogged down in an unusual or difficult concept in the textbook and you're like wasting time trying to figure out what's going on, then I think it would be better just to go and ask the teacher for help, so then you're not wasting too much time. As for reading the textbook, the chapters I believe are about 30 to 36 pages, and the expectation is that you finish 1 per week, and that standard is held pretty strictly in class. It's important to be able to keep up with the material. And it does help because you go over it in class. So like you need to be able to keep up with the material so that you can participate in the class discussions and activities, because it's like going over the material that you learned for that unit at that time. And then apart from that, I guess that's pretty much it for reading from, yeah, for taking notes and reading from the textbook.
All right, that's me. So I will talk about the US government exam, or the full name is United States Government and Politics AP exam. This will be, this will likely be your last AP history class that you will take after WHAP and APUSH in your sophomore and junior years. And hopefully by this point, you will already be a lot more experienced after taking those two classes, and probably a combination of other humanities APs like AP Lang. But compared to the WHAP and APUSH exam, I'll touch on this later, but government is probably a lot lighter and a lot easier. And because of that, at Branham, it is usually taught as a one semester course with econ, economy as the second semester course. The AP US government, the course is broken down into American democracy, where you will learn about federalism and the different components of the American democracy, including like the media and interest group. Next, you move on to branches of government. This is pretty straightforward. The Congress, the executive branch, which is the president, and then the judicial branch. And then civil liberties and rights, where you will learn about the different past civil rights movements in the United States and the amendments. And last, you move on to political participation. Which you'll learn about voting and other ways that you can participate in the United States political system. I think there are some other parts I'm leaving off, but that's the main bulk of the class. The US government test is also a little bit different than the WHAP and APUSH test, which while those two are structured more similarly, the Gov exam is quite different. So you have a really long and bulky FRQ session. It is 55 questions, an hour and 20 minutes. There are, I think the majority, about half are stimulus based and half are just pure knowledge that they test you on for about the American government. And then for the SAQ, compared to, I'm not sure how many SAQs that WHAP and APUSH have, but for the Gov exam, you have 3 FRQs, starting with, okay, I did this backwards, but you're starting with the conceptual applications. So the test will give you some kind of political scenario, like, okay, I'm putting myself on the spot, like the Environment Protection Agency, they may pass a bill, and how can the president or the Congress or the Supreme Court affect this passing of the bill? And they will ask you to apply it to different situations. And then the second portion of the short answer question is probably the easiest portion. It's to analyze statistics. It can be some trend, for example, the percentage of Republicans versus Democrats in the past few years, and how that can tie into the different other political trends that you might observe. And the last one, this is probably the most tricky and something that you need to get more used to. It's a SCOTUS comparison. SCOTUS standing for the Supreme Court of the United States. So like the next bullet point below, there are many key documents that you have to know for this exam. The heaviest is probably that there are 14. I think there are 14 court cases that you have to know from heart. And on the exam, they will give you a smaller Supreme Court case that you haven't memorized, and you're asked to compare it to one of the 14 Supreme Court cases that you need to know by heart. yeah, that's probably the toughest section of the exam, just because of how much memorization you have to do. And last is the argumentative essay. This is more similar to the LEQ for both WHAP and APUSH. They give you a statement and you have to take a side and argue for that. Like I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of key documents that you have to know for Gov, like the SCOTUS courses I mentioned earlier. Of course, you have to know the U.S. Constitution, and just a lot of different events and documents that leads to or builds up the American democracy. And last, it's very important in Gov, well, equally as important in APUSH and WAP, that you're able to make connections between the different events and the different documents that tie into a big net. And yeah, next slide, please. Once I touched on this a little bit earlier, but how is Gov different from WAP and APUSH? Well, I think the biggest difference is that the amount of content that you have to absorb in these three classes are drastically different. In WAP, right, you have a lot of civilizations that you have to know about, their culture, their language, their politics over thousands of years. And in APUSH, you have to know about all these events in the hundreds of years in the United States history, and there are a lot of small details that you have to memorize. But Gov isn't history in the traditional sense that you might expect from WAP and APUSH. It's more knowing the structure of the government system. So there's less hard dates and facts that you have to memorize, but you have to have the ability to visualize the structure of the government system. And this is, I think, asked earlier for WAP and APUSH, for how to study and review for Gov. Of course, as the other two speakers mentioned earlier, one key component to have a successful exam and class is to have a combination of resources that you use to study and to review. Of course, Mr. Selfridge does an amazing job with his lectures, and the textbook is more than sufficient to teach you all the material. However, you still need to look for outside resources to explain to yourself again and to deepen your understanding of the material. For example, you might read the Constitution in class and do some kind of group activity to break it down. But it's always good to watch some online videos. I forgot the name of the YouTuber I watched this year, but yeah, I can't remember it. But a combination of resources will keep pounding in the information in your brain, and you will kind of memorize it and be able to visualize all the information better. Yeah.
Norina, I do not know which AP you are here for, but if you have any extra questions, then feel free to ask any of them. But I'll give you a second, and I won't close the call. But if you do not have any questions, I'm going to just end it by saying all these. The link to the slideshow will be in the description of this video. And then this is also going up on the Bruin IGTV. And is there an that I can link in the video, you guys, Tommy and Jake? Is there an account that I can plug? Let's see. Okay. Good to know, Norina. Thank you for coming, though. And then, yeah, just gonna wait for your guys's social media handles if you guys want me to plug you in the description. Tommy's is, I think, Tommy _S_ 515.
Yeah.
Yes. And then Jake, do you mind?
I don't have any social media.
Oh, okay. He does not have any social media, so just enjoy while he talks during this video, I guess. And then what else? Yeah, the previous videos on like AP Art and the math APs and the the English APs, I should say, are also on the same playlist. And yeah, that's it. Give these wonderful people a like, you guys. This is how we beat the YouTube algorithm. Okay, I'm gonna pause, stop the recording.